I wouldn't lay claim to a single truth in any area of marketing. What I would say is there are certain areas of marketing, and I'll include Mark's area in this, which pay back disproportionately well, simply because they've been woefully under-investigated in the past 20, 30, 40 years. And the reason is that, to a great extent, marketing adopted a model where brand preference, supported by rational persuasion, translated perfectly into purchase behaviour. I don't think any of us instinctively really believed this, but it was a kind of convenient fiction. It was contrived really defensively to defend the advertising industry against accusations of working in an underhand fashion, in books such as The Hidden Persuaders. So this overt, persuasive model of advertising was really adopted defensively to protect the industry from attack, until unfortunately it became adopted so effectively that people sort of started behaving as if they believed it. Which is not to say, by the way, that it's untrue. What's patently true and inarguable is that brand preference is extraordinarily important and has a massive effect on purchase behaviour. What isn't true is the assumption that quite a lot of people make, which is it's the only game in town. Just as gravity patently exists, it's a massively potent force in nature. It's what keeps us in orbit around the sun, but it's not the only force that acts on moving objects. I think the mistake we've made is that, let's face it, theoretical physicists are probably cleverer than all of us here in the room put together, and yet they've basically given up on attempts to consolidate the four fundamental forces of physics down into one. They occasionally try and reduce it to three, and then give up when the maths does their heads in. Okay? So I think in our case, if you want a realistic model of what affects human behaviour, which is after all our job is to turn human understanding into business advantage for our clients, all we have to do is acknowledge there are other forces at work. Among those forces are patently brand preference. I would also include massively the herd effect. In fact, I'd be even more convinced by the herd effect if it weren't for the fact that its leading proponent is actually a Welsh Catholic, which is about as anomalous as you can get. It's one of the great ironies of the world is that the author of a book called Herd is actually the only pape in the village. Must have been really lonely, going around going, got some lovely incense here. What a bizarre thing. Anyway, but no, I patently believe that's an extraordinarily powerful force acting on behaviour as well. What we simply need to acknowledge is that brand preference is very, very important, but it does not translate perfectly every time into purchase behaviour. There are other forces at work. Now, just as if you look at gravity in terms of the physical forces, what's interesting about gravity, it's a relatively weak force, but it is spectacularly pervasive and operates at amazingly long ranges. So 93 million miles we're kept in orbit around the sun, a spectacular distance. The moon is kept in orbit around the Earth at 250,000 miles. So gravity operates at an amazingly long range. On the other hand, it isn't actually that powerful on the grounds that I can throw that thing up in the air, counteracting the combined gravitational force of all the atoms on Earth. So that's one kind of force. Equally, you have forces like electromagnetism, or, for example, the strong nuclear force, which are very, very powerful, but operate over a very short range. What I think we have in marketing is brand preference is slightly similar to gravity. It operates over a long range and a long distance, a long way away from points of decision or purchase, but it may be relatively weak. Equally, there are other forces such as choice architecture, praxeology, if you want to use a technical term, framing effects, and other effects, which actually operate very powerfully, but at a very short distance from the moment of purchase or the moment of decision. The problem we have is we have research methodologies which detect gravity, but can't detect anything else, because all our research takes place at a distance from actual decision-making. And therefore, it's as if we've developed incredibly sophisticated gravity meters, but we have no means of actually detecting or measuring the electromagnetic force. Now, I'll give you just a couple of examples, I think, of very, very simple things. First of all, virtually all human evaluation is relative. Our brains work on a highly relativistic basis. We do not know the value of anything except by comparing it to the value of something else. That's one vital thing that's extraordinarily important lesson of behavioural economics. So that go out, actually, when you finish, go to Tesco or Waitrose and buy those super premium Twinings tea bags, which are, I think, £6.50 for 25 tea bags. Okay? £6, I think, for 25 tea bags. And you, like me, look at this price, you come across all northern, you're disgusting, I can't possibly buy that. Okay, and you go, 6 quid, you should get 1,000 tea bags for that. And the comparative set is Tetley. That's you. And then you suddenly go, actually, looked at dispassionately as a behavioural economist, actually, 25p for the pleasure of a cup of tea isn't all that bad. We've all paid, actually, 2 or 3 quid for vastly less pleasurable experiences than that. But our brain doesn't actually have a proper scale of pleasure or pain avoidance per pound. It only works comparatively. In espresso, those of you who have an espresso machine will simply learn that actually, because the comparative set, anybody here got an espresso machine? It's basically equivalent, the price of an espresso coffee, to paying about 500 quid for a jar of Nescafe. But because it actually comes in individual pods, the comparative set is not Nescafe, it's Starbucks. So we think that 26p for one of these pods is actually a bit of a bargain. So that's one vital lesson, that actually there is no pure definition of value, that if you can change the comparative set of anything, what people will pay will change dramatically. The second thing I think is important is understanding that decision-making is sequential. That we've made the mistake of always assuming that everything's a brand question, and if you can only strengthen the brand, actually then you will get the business. Actually, there are huge categories of behaviour which are actually written off or ignored or never even contemplated, okay, before we even get to the point of individual brand consideration. My favourite single business, is anybody here from New York or lived there? 1-800-Mattress strikes me as perhaps the most beautiful business of all time. It does the naffest advertising in the world. 1-800 numbers only have 7 digits, so it's actually M-A-T-T-R-E-S. But you leave off the last S because that's the S for savings. But the brilliant insight of this business, okay, the brilliant insight of this business is long before you will ever make a brand decision about which mattress you want to buy or how much you want to spend, there is an initial problem which needs to be sorted first. This is understood in Ludwig von Mises' concept of praxeology, in which we make decisions sequentially dealing with the most pressing problem first. And the brand question is not always the most pressing issue. If you're buying a mattress in New York, the most pressing issue is actually, how the fuck do I get rid of the old one? There are 3 possibilities. You're a very rich New Yorker, in which case you get your butler to remove it. You're a very poor New Yorker, in which case you throw it out of the window of your tenement block and hope nobody knows which story it came from. But if you're the remaining 85%, you basically have to ring 1-800-Mattress. Because the whole premise of this thing, the guy, by the way, owns about 78% of the New York mattress business, because he worked out insightfully that the real issue in praxeological terms is the first question is not what mattress do I buy, it's how do I get rid of this bastard old mattress. So simply understanding the way in which human decisions are made close to the point of sale, I don't think you need £1 million because it's not that expensive. In fact, one of the glories of this area of study is that it's actually very, very inexpensive. Maybe spend £20,000 on this and reserve the rest for really good brand advertising. But actually, if your praxeology is wrong, if your behavioural economics is wrong, then your advertising and all the other activities, that what I might call the long-range activities, are proportionately less effective. My belief is that marketing strategy, instead of starting with what's expensive and working down to what's cheap, should actually start with what's close to the point of decision and actually work further away. So the whole concept of marketing strategy has been distorted by what's expensive and not necessarily what's important. So the understanding of these tiny little biases in human behaviour, that very, very small changes, the way you frame a question, has a massive effect on the answers people give. Why is the bottled water category so profitable and so successful in restaurants? Because there are 2 kinds of it. If people ask the question, do you want bottled water? Quite often the answer to the waiter will be no, piss off. The brilliant question, still or sparkling, red or white, tea or coffee, by its nature is a different kind of question which contains within it the presumption that you will take one of those 2 options. If there weren't 2 kinds of bottled water, the sector would be about 1/10 of the size. Understanding this kind of stuff is actually at the heart of behavioural economics, and without it, there is no true understanding of the way humans behave. But actually, the vital thing to remember is, and the doubly vital thing is that in many cases, behaviour leads attitude and not the other way around. There's one extra insight of behavioural economics, it's that if you hear a man say, my wife doesn't understand me, it does not mean he's about to have an affair, it means he's just had one. Thank you very much indeed.